Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about miscarriage and dealing with the loss of babies or a baby through miscarriage. This is something that's been on my heart for a while. As I don't know if some of you saw the video that I made back in May, or maybe it was even June, but we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of my first miscarriage. And yeah, these next couple of months are going to be really difficult. And I just want to put out there that when I talk about this, I'm strictly talking about my own experience and my own emotional and mental and physical experience with these things. I'm not talking about it to scare anybody. I'm not talking about it because I want attention. I'm talking about it because I really do believe that it's a taboo subject, even though you will find a lot of women on YouTube or on Instagram who have gone through these things talk about it. It's still, I feel, taboo and not something that you can just talk about. If somebody talks about it, I feel like it's kind of a big deal. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be talking about today. If you are new to my channel or if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and do that. I would really appreciate it. Just to get started. So last year was definitely the hardest year of my life. It was so difficult mentally, physically, emotionally. I just felt completely beat down by the end of it. And if it hadn't been for my family and my friends and obviously the grace of God, I don't know how I would have coped with it. Never in a place where I, thought about hurting myself or anything like that. It was just very challenging on my emotional state and my physical state and all that kind of stuff. So almost a year ago, March 4th, we found out that I was pregnant with my second child, or our second child. I found out for like 5.5 weeks on, I was so sick. I could barely get control over it. And I'm not really sure why. My theory is that I had just had surgery. I got pregnant almost immediately after having surgery. And the surgery that I had was for endometriosis and to remove endometriosis. And that messes with your hormones a lot. So my theory is because my pregnancy wasn't healthy and I wasn't really in full health, that's why I was so miserable. Because with Roger, I was really sick, but once I started taking nausea medication, it decreased extremely. Like, it was night and day to what it was without the medicine. But with my second pregnancy, it didn't matter what I did. I just could not get a handle on it. So anyway, we were really excited, obviously, and then a month later, we found out that I was going to have a miscarriage. And it took a really long time. It took about 3 weeks, and it finally happened, and I delivered that baby. It was pretty much like a labor and delivery, just not full term. And I was able to bury that baby and say goodbye and all of that kind of stuff. It was really, really difficult. It was very traumatic on my body. And I just never really bounced back from that, from the nausea and all of that kind of stuff. So we waited about 3 months, maybe a little bit less than 3 months, to start trying again. And we started trying again in the beginning of July, and I got pregnant immediately. Time around, we were pretty hesitant because when I took the pregnancy test, it was positive, but it was so faint that, we were just very apprehensive. And sure enough, 2 or 3 days after I got that positive pregnancy test, I started bleeding. And that miscarriage was a lot less traumatic on my body. No less heartbreaking for me than the first one, just because all of your hopes and just the happiness, I finally felt like I was out from under this cloud that I had been under all summer, and it was just taken away almost immediately. Didn't wait to start trying again that time, and we started trying immediately in August, and again I got pregnant right away. I really didn't think that I was going to be pregnant that time, and if I didn't get pregnant, then we were going to wait until after the holidays and, you know, just sort of put a pin in it, because I really didn't want to be sick during Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that kind of stuff. But I did get pregnant, and we found out September 2nd. I really did not think that it was going to be positive when I took the test, but it was. And I was scared out of my mind. Every single time I went to the bathroom, I was just expecting to see blood, or I was expecting it to be another miscarriage. And my husband was really encouraging during that whole time, and he was really hopeful. And, you know, once I got past 6 weeks, I was really, really sick. It wasn't quite as bad as my second pregnancy, but it was still bad enough where it was just at a certain point in the day I started feeling sick, and I didn't stop feeling sick until the next morning, and it was just kind of like a cycle. But my husband was really supportive, and he was trying to be as encouraging as possible. But after you have 2 miscarriages in a row, you are very, very cautious about getting excited and hopeful and all of that kind of stuff. But, you know, I did start getting excited, and I started feeling prepared and like thinking about everything that we needed to do. My due date was May 6th with this one, and I was just getting excited about telling everybody, and everything felt like it was good. And then right before October 1st, we scheduled an ultrasound at a abortion alternative clinic. They needed volunteers, so we scheduled one. And that whole day, I just had the worst feeling. And I don't want to base, like, you know, I don't want to say that, you know, it's this mystical thing, easily gone the other way. And if it didn't go the way that it did, I probably still would have had that feeling. But about an hour or so before we left for the ultrasound, I felt really defeated, and I was like to Sam, my husband, I really don't think they're going to find a heartbeat. And I just felt really, like I said, defeated. But we went, and I was supposed to be 9 weeks along, and he did the ultrasound. The nurses and the ultrasound technicians in training were doing the ultrasound, and they didn't see anything. There was the sac, but no embryo in there. And I knew that, you know, I was going to have another miscarriage. And the guy told us, you know, they don't know why it happens. It's called a blighted ovum, where basically the placenta is growing, the sac is growing, but the embryo didn't fully develop. And yeah, I just left crushed, and I couldn't believe that I was going to have to go through this again. In a matter of 7 months, I had, or was going to have, 3 miscarriages. And when we left, I just had no clue how I was going to do it and how I was going to get through the next few weeks. And I just had a bad feeling that it was going to take a really long time. But anyway, we had an appointment with my OB for my first official ultrasound there, and we decided to keep it. And we went in, and I was like, you know, maybe I'm just not as far along as I thought I was. So I asked the nurse to do an internal, and it was the same as what the other doctor told me. So my doctor came in and we talked for a really long time. He talked about options. He still didn't think that it was anything like genetically wrong with me or with Sam, that all of a sudden we just weren't able to have a, compatible embryo or whatever. He said that it was pretty unlikely that I've developed an autoimmune disease and all that kind of stuff. So we decided to just leave it and sort of see what happened. We did decide that I would go on progesterone the next time that we started trying to have a baby, because that's sort of the next step that most gynecologists and OBs take if you have multiple miscarriages. Came the excruciating part of waiting for this to happen, and it took a month and a half for my body to be like, okay, it's time for us to do this. And the waiting was torture. It was complete torture. It completely messes with your mind. And the week before, I was just in total denial. I was like, they must have been wrong. I don't know why this is taking so long. Like, they just don't know what they're talking about. And it was so hard because you're just waiting for this awful thing to happen, and you can't. I couldn't get out of this state until it happened, and I was so sick in those 4 weeks. The nausea seemed to peak after that appointment, and I just felt sick all the time. And if I didn't eat like every half hour, I felt like I was going to throw up, and it was just so physically exhausting and so mentally exhausting, and that I wouldn't wish on anybody on this earth. So the week of Halloween, the Sunday before Halloween, so I guess the 26th, I can't remember exactly what date it was, I started bleeding lightly. And I was like, okay, so this is it. It's going to happen soon. But that was how it was pretty much all week. I just bled kind of lightly, and then I was like, maybe it's not going to be like my first one. Maybe it'll just be kind of like this. And getting a little bit hopeful that it wouldn't be the way that it was the first time. But November 1st, I was bleeding pretty heavily, and we put Roger to bed that night. I started having contractions, really bad contractions, and I knew that it was going to be the whole thing again. So it took about 3 hours. The miscarriage finally happened, and I delivered the placenta. It was different from my first one in the fact that I didn't have anything to bury, and I just think that's because the embryo didn't develop. But it was the same as my first one in the fact that I had all of the contractions and I delivered everything else. After I delivered the placenta, I was bleeding so much. It scared me, and I didn't know why it was happening. And obviously you're exhausted and you feel awful afterwards because it's a big deal and it's a huge trauma on your body. But within an hour, I started looking ghostly white, and I could barely stand and I could barely walk. And so we ended up going to the hospital, but we actually didn't stay because it slowed down significantly about a half hour after we got to the hospital, and it was already 1 o'clock and they hadn't called us back yet. And I just really felt like I needed to sleep and to rest. And we ended up going home. One of our friends had come to the house to just be in the house with Roger. Obviously he was in bed, but one of our good friends came and sat in the house to make sure nothing happened. And we came back and I slept, although I didn't sleep well that night. It was really horrible. I couldn't get warm. I felt really sick. just from the blood loss. But I just really want to say that if you feel like something isn't right, don't be afraid to go to the hospital or, get checked, because you don't want to wait to the point, because if there is something wrong, you don't want to wait until the point where it's too late and it's an emergency situation, because those things can escalate really quickly. And you'll know your body, but if you are concerned, go see somebody and get looked at, because it's not worth the risk. Ended up coming down here. I'm actually at my parents' right now. We came here because I was gonna need help with Roger. I couldn't even bend over at the waist. I just felt so miserable, and I was so weak, and I was in so much pain, and I knew that I was gonna need 24-hour help with him. So I ended up coming and staying with my parents for a couple of weeks. And that was sort of where I recovered and all that kind of stuff. I also want to talk about the emotional toll that it took afterwards. So at this point, I had had 3 miscarriages. 2 of them were full-on labor and deliveries, just, not full term. And I felt pretty defeated, and I felt pretty low, and I don't like to use the word depressed lightly. I do think during those next few months I was a little bit depressed. Nothing that usually excited me about that season, because it was right before Thanksgiving and Christmas, was exciting me. I just kind of felt meh about it. I had that miscarriage a week before the due date of my first baby, or of my second baby, and Sam and I were not, we didn't get the opportunity to do anything in celebration for that baby or in remembrance, because I couldn't even move. So it was the lowest point that I've ever felt in my lifetime. I was just so sad, and I just honestly didn't know how I was even functioning. It was just, it's feelings and emotions that are really hard to put into words, but the fear and the doubt and the anxiety and just not knowing what the future holds were just really taking a toll on me. And and I know that I'm not really saying any of this very well. It's so hard to talk about, and it's so hard to put into words, like I already said, but I was pretty much just going through the motions, and I do think that helped, because not just sitting around like forcing myself to make Christmas cookies, forcing myself to see people and doing all that kind of stuff, I think that helped a lot, and not just being focused on myself and the pain and the grief that I was going through really helped in the healing process. And I just want to say, I really don't think that I'm ever gonna be fully healed emotionally from the loss of these babies, because they're very much a part of me and a part of who I am, and I'm still their mother. And it's hard because, for me, I have 4 babies. I just don't have 4 babies on earth. And it's so hard to just go around and sort of have to not pretend, but you do have to be considerate of the other people around you. And you ask me how many kids I have, I'm probably not going to say 4. I have to say 1, right? But that's so hard emotionally to come to terms with, because I don't want to be inconsiderate of other people. And that's one of the things about miscarriage, is it's a very lonely type of grief. because you as the mother, or me as the mother, I've felt it so harshly. And there have been times where I haven't even been able to explain how harshly I felt it. The whole 2 weeks after this last miscarriage, I just wanted to scream. I just wanted to yell and just bear everything that I was feeling inside of me and just let it out. But I can't do that. You know what I mean? You just can't do that. It's just not. So the thing that I did turn to and will always turn to is the Lord, and just prayed all the time and just asked him to give me peace and to give me strength to get through the next months and to be a good mother to Roger, because honestly, you know, because Roger still needs me, and I, of course, love him. I love him so much, and I appreciate that child so much. He was and is a comfort to me in ways that he won't even know, and he can't even imagine. And I'm just so grateful to God for giving him to me, because I can't imagine going through that without him, honestly. And maybe that's selfish to put all of that on a 2-year-old. So, you know, I read my Bible with him, and we sort of just maintained our routine to the best of my ability during that time, and that did help a lot. Holidays were really hard because, you know, you have to go and be around all of your little nieces and nephews. And again, I love them so much and I'm so grateful for them, but it does remind you of all of your losses, and everything that, you know, you were hoping for is kind of on the back burner, and you're just in this state of grief. And, you know, it is something that you really have to deal with, Lord willing, not on your own, but there are aspects of it that you do kind of have to come to peace with. But again, I wouldn't have been able to come to peace with that if I didn't trust in the Lord and trust in his promises, because I do believe that he works all of these things for his good. And I know that if nothing else, all of 2019 taught me to lean on him for everything, because I have literally no control over what happens in my life. I mean, I have a little bit of control, but ultimately the plans of the Lord are not my plans sometimes. You know, people will ask me if I'm encouraged by this or that. Like, you know, I think someone asked him if I was encouraged about the prospect of taking progesterone for the next time that we start trying. And, you know, it's really hard because there's not much that's encouraging when you're in it. It's just, and maybe it sounds really awful, but the thing that will be the most encouraging to me is having baby and seeing that heartbeat and holding that baby in my arms, that living baby in my arms. And, you know, I'm not trying to sound cynical or anything like that, but I think you can be joyful about things and recognize the gift that God has given you, but also understand that his plans might not be what your plans are. And so with saying that, I am so thankful that I get to love these little lives forever. I have confidence that they are resting in the arms of the Lord right now, and that, you know, they won't have to experience any of the horrible things of this fallen world that we live in. And so I can look at all of those things as trying to say, you can find the joy in these horrible, horrible things. And, you know, the Lord gives you peace and he gives you comfort. During the waiting period, I would look at articles and read things from women who were experiencing this, and they didn't have any hope, and they didn't know what the point of anything was. And you know, I don't understand why the Lord chose to take those babies before I was able to raise them, but I also have peace with that, because I know that his plans are perfect, and that he loves me, and he loves my children, and he loves my husband, and that he will provide for us, and he always provides for us. So again, that's something that I'm really thankful for. And right now I'm doing better emotionally, although there are days where I'm still really, really sad, and it just sort of hits you out of nowhere, and you just feel this shock of grief and sadness, and think about everything that you've lost. And again, I don't think that'll ever go away. It's about getting pregnant again, especially because pregnancy is really hard on my body. It's hard on every woman's body. Pregnancy is hard. It's not it's not an easy undertaking. So I am really nervous about it. I'm afraid because I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'm going to be able to bear another child to term. I just don't know. So there are all of those fears and apprehensions, but I'm trying to trust in the Lord, and Sam and I are not at the point where we're ready to sort of give up trying to conceive another child and for me to bear another child. But there are a lot of fears, and there are a lot of uncertainties. Yeah, I am now not only part of the 1 in 4 women, but I am part of the 1 in 8 women. 1 in 8 women will have 3 miscarriages in a row. And I just think that people need to be aware, and, you know, I just don't want this to be a taboo subject anymore. And like I've said before, if talking about these things and talking about my experiences helps even one person, then I will feel like I've achieved something. So yeah, I hope that this video makes some type of sense. I am kind of dreading going back and looking at everything that I've said, but yeah, I hope that you found this helpful. I hope that, you know, you found it encouraging somewhat. If you think about it, I would really appreciate your prayers, and just that the Lord will give me peace and rest in him, and that he will help me trust in him, and that he'll also help me be content in whatever he holds for mine and my family's future. But yeah, I hope that you guys had a great weekend. I hope that you have a good week, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.